Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Tay Insight Mill. This movie tells the story of 10 people who take the same lucrative job but find themselves locked up and forced to play a murder game. Who will be the winner and win the grand prize in the end? Let's find out in the Insight Mill. The Insight Mill begins by showing a young man named Yuki who is looking through a magazine in search of a job. However, Yuki feels hopeless because the jobs match his abilities, most of which have very minimal wages. Not long after, a woman named Shoko approached him who was confused. Shoko seems to notice that Yuki is looking for a job. Shoko then offers Yuki a job for 112,000 yen or $1,236 per hour, without having any experience or qualifications. Yuki, who needs money and has no special skills, is immediately tempted and accepts the job offered by Shoko. Long story short, Yuki and 10 other people, including Shoko, were then taken to a place called the Interticum Experimental Foundation, which was said to collect psychological data on 10 people for a secret study for 7 days. An operator speaking over a loudspeaker told them to put all their belongings in a locker and led the 10 people down a spiral staircase that led underground. When they reached the end of the stairs, they came to a room with a large dining table. When everyone had entered the room, the only door they went through as access in and out was locked automatically. The 10 people then checked the situation in the room. Several people noticed a monitor on the wall showing the remaining time running backward for the next 7 days. However, they are still unsure about the monitor screen under the timepiece, which only displays a 3-digit number that changes. Several other people checked the dining table, which turned out to have been served various delicious dishes prepared for all of them. Not only that, on the table there are also 10 miniature statues dressed in Indian customs. The 10 people then decided to eat together and get to know each other. There was a bespectacled man named Osako who came to the place with his fiancée named Wakana. There is also a young man named Maki and a woman with long hair named Mia. Besides Yuki and Shoko, there is also a man with thick glasses named Iwai, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Fuchi, an old man named Mr. Ando, and a man named Nishino who is wearing a red jacket. After the participants get to know each other, one of the miniature statues speaks and welcomes the participants to a house called Paranoia. After that, came a sentry robot walking on the track that stretched above the ceiling. The robot guard then explains the rules that all participants must obey while in Paranoia within 7 days. First, all participants are required to enter their respective rooms before 10 p.m. Second, if a crime case occurs, the participants must solve the case and find the culprit. Someone who can solve the case is called a detective. When the detective has determined who the imposter or culprit is, the other participants may vote to agree or disagree with the detective's decision. If the majority vote results show that they agree with the detective's decision, the robot guard will take the imposter to prison. Third, the game will end within 7 days or when there are only 2 participants left. After that, the participants were asked to take cards with numbers in the order of 1 to 10 to determine their room. When the participants had finished eating and enjoyed their free time, Nishino came to Mrs. Fuchi who was in the kitchen with Mia. Nishino then confronted Mrs. Fuchi by saying that she looks like the school principal who abused her students who appeared in the news recently. Mrs. Fuchi clearly denied the accusations and was very upset that she felt slandered. On the other hand, Mia looks very scared hearing this. Meanwhile, the other participants found a box of tools that detectives often use to solve criminal cases, as well as a shelf full of detective stories from around the world. Not long after, an announcement was heard telling the participants to immediately enter their rooms because it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. Yuki and Shoko said goodbye to each other before entering their respective rooms. Yuki realizes that the door to his room does not have a lock and that there is a mysterious box in his room and the rooms of the other 9 participants. When all participants opened the box using the card they chose, they were surprised to find a sharp weapon and a message on a piece of paper in the box. The following day, when Mia was walking down the hall, Mia screamed hysterically after seeing the horrific scene in front of her. Everyone immediately came out of the room as soon as they heard Mia's screams and were very surprised to see Nishino, who had been lying lifeless from being shot many times. Immediately, the other 9 participants realized that they were involved in a life-threatening murderous game. Yuki, who panicked, ran towards the door and begged the game master through the CCTV camera to get himself out of there. However, the door remained locked and they were all trapped inside. Mr. Ando, who tried to remain level-headed in responding to the terrible incident to Nishino, then suggested everyone check the box in Nishino's room and find a capsule containing cyanide poison that had been slightly bitten. After investigating Nishino's room, all participants then followed the robot guard who carried Nishino's body somewhere. In a room, they saw Nishino's body put in a coffin and there were 8 coffins. The participants are increasingly convinced that they are involved in a deadly game. After that, the operator announced over the loudspeaker that it was time to solve the Nishino murder case and determine who had killed Nishino. The operator also promised double pay for the participants who became detectives and properly uncovered the Nishino murder case and the imposter and the victim. Hearing the tempting offer, everyone seemed interested and Osako didn't waste the opportunity to take the forefront of becoming a detective for the first time. Osako firmly pointed to Iwai as the culprit because she had heard that Nishino had accused Iwai of being a murderer on Aoyama Street who was wanted by the police, whose face was plastered on the newspapers. But Yuki then intervened in Osako's accusation, because according to him, people have no right to accuse each other carelessly. Yuki then suggests that all participants show the weapons they have in the box, to find out if anyone has a gun that can be used to shoot Nishino. Obviously, everyone immediately rejected Yuki's suggestion because they were afraid of being caught by the imposter who would try to attack them. Without further ado, Osako immediately held a vote where the voting results showed 4 people agreed with Osako's decision to appoint Iwai as the perpetrator of Nishino's murder and 3 others did not agree. When Shoko was about to say her choice, she chose to skip and was approved by the robot guard. Finally, Iwai was then taken away by the robot guard, then electrocuted and thrown in prison. Yuki, who tried to prevent Iwai from being imprisoned, was thrown by the guard robot instead until his body hit the wall hard. All the remaining participants then returned to their respective rooms. Yuki, who was in his room alone, then rechecked the weapon in the box and there was a gun in it. He immediately panicked and was surprised because the weapon he got before was not a gun. Because their room door is not locked, so anyone can be suspected. The participants then checked the weapons in Iwai's room and found the box empty. Osako then assumed that the imposter was still in their midst and would try to pit the participants against each other. When all the participants had gone to their respective rooms to sleep, Yuki checked the number of bullets in the gun and realized that the gun had not been fired, which meant that the gun was not the weapon used to kill Nishino. Yuki was relieved. Meanwhile, Mrs. Fuchi, who had secretly sneaked out of the room to pick up a book in the lounge, was shot in the head by Mia using a nail gun. On the 3rd day, the participants found Mrs. Fuchi's body in the hallway and immediately checked her box, which was also empty like Iwai's. Seeing the people who were killed one by one, then made Wakana become frightened and screamed hysterically. She rushed to the door and asked to be removed from the deadly game. The atmosphere immediately became chaotic and the participants accused each other, until finally Mr. Ando broke them all. Osako, who suspects Mr. Ando, then asks the old man why he participates in the deadly game. Mr. Ando revealed that his son had participated in this game 6 months ago and died in the deadly game. Since then, he has tried to enter the game to find out what really happened in the game. In the evening, Mr. Ando visits Yuki in his room and suggests that they patrol the hallway to avoid more casualties. So far, Mr. Ando has been observing the movement of the guard robot, which only moves clockwise. Thus, they can avoid the surveillance of the robot guard by moving counterclockwise. Yuki and the other participants agreed to Mr. Ando's proposal. Long story short, after Mr. Ando proposed a plan to patrol all the participants, Yuki and Shoko got the first turn to patrol the hallway. While they were on patrol, the guard robot suddenly turned around, causing both of them to panic and immediately hide from the guard robot's attention. Meanwhile, Wakana, who was supposed to be patrolling with Mia in place of Yuki and Shoko on the next turn, was busy chatting with Osako in one of the coffins. Wakana, who felt uncomfortable because the room felt haunted, decided to leave and leave Osako. Unexpectedly, after Wakana left, the ceiling in the room moved down slowly, then surprisingly dropped very quickly and instantly crushed Osako's body until he was crushed to death by the ceiling. The next day, on the 4th day, the participants, who already knew the cause of Osako's death, then tried to find the location of the switch to move the ceiling of the room, but could not find any buttons or switches. Wakana, who knew that her boyfriend had died horribly, cried hysterically and cursed the cruel actions of the imposter who had killed Osako. The ceiling in the room started to move again, so the participants rushed out of there. While outside, Mr. Ando and Yuki caught Maki playing with a remote. Because he was accused of being the imposter, Maki then ran away and showed his weapon, a crossbow, while trying to prove that he was not the imposter. Because he was still being accused, Maki then shot several arrows at Mr. Ando and the others. However, Wakana, who was already depressed because of Osako's death, suddenly burst into Maki's room and immediately killed him with an axe. After that, she committed suicide by slashing her neck with the axe. After Maki's death, they also checked the weapon in the box in Maki's room, and indeed the weapon is a crossbow. This implies that there are 2 importers in the game. After taking care of the bodies of Wakana and Maki, the participants then tried to calm down in the dining room. When Mia was serving hot tea to the participants, Yuki noticed a cut scar on her wrist. After the participants returned to their respective rooms, Yuki came to Mia in her room and asked about the scar on her wrist. Mia then told that since childhood she had a disharmonious relationship with her family and had a dark past, causing her to want to commit suicide many times. After having a child, Mia feels her life is getting happier, so she is determined to get out of this deadly game at all costs to meet her son again. Hearing this, Yuki immediately guessed Mia as the imposter who killed Mrs. Fuchi. However, Yuki immediately went limp and collapsed after Mia mixed a muscle-relaxing poison into his tea drink, which she found in a box in Mrs. Fuchi's room. Mia then reveals that she purposely killed Mrs. Fuchi because she reminded her of the principal who abused her students. Mia then tried to kill Yuki with a nail gun, but Yuki could dodge the attack and immediately fled out of the room. The robot guard was on patrol in the hallway and ordered the participants to return to their rooms because it was approaching 10 at night. Because he already knew the movement of the guard robot, Yuki was able to avoid the guard robot's monitoring and hide. Mia, who no longer cared about this, then got a punishment from the guard robot for violating the first rule, where the guard robot shot Mia to death. Seeing this, Yuki finally realized that Nishino died for violating the first rule, so the robot guard shot him. On the 5th day, Yuki then explained the incident that happened to him and Mia to the other participants and revealed that Nishino died because the robot guard shot him. Yuki assumes that Nishino tried to kill himself by drinking cyanide poison so that he becomes a victim and earns money, which will later be sent to his family. Not long after, an operator's voice was heard praising Yuki's analytical skills. Because he managed to guess the cause of Nishino's death correctly, he was entitled to a prize money. But Yuki, who no longer cared about this, then asked Mr. Ando and Shoko to show their respective weapons. Yuki first showed him the weapon he had, which is a gun with bullets that were still intact, while Mr. Ando's weapon was an icebreaker. But Shoko still refuses to show her weapon. On the 6th day, Yuki, who had caught Mr. Ando holding his gun, realized that the column under the monitor showing the time actually showed the number of viewers watching their situation in the game. Yuki, Mr. Ando and Shoko then spent the 6th day without anyone being killed. The following day, on the 7th day, Yuki found that the gun and the ice pick in the dining room had disappeared. Not only that, when he was looking for everyone, he found the door to the cell that imprisoned Iwai had been broken and Iwai had disappeared. It turned out that there was a CCTV camera room where someone from there had monitored their movements not far from the prison cell. When Yuki headed to the coffin room, he saw Mr. Ando lying unconscious in the coffin covered in blood. Not long after, Iwai came and immediately strangled Yuki. Iwai later confesses that he was the imposter who killed Osako. After seeing Osako and Wakana through the CCTV camera in the surveillance room, Iwai then dropped the ceiling of the room using the remote, then threw the remote away, until Maki accidentally found it. Yuki also realizes that Nishino and Osako's guess that Iwai is a fugitive killer on Aoyama Street is also true. Yuki tries to escape to the dining room, but Iwai manages to push him and intends to kill Yuki with an ice cube stab. But then Shoko comes and puts a gun to Iwai's head and threatens to shoot him. Yuki immediately remembered that Mr. Ando had changed the bullet in the gun to a bomb bullet, then tried to prevent Shoko from firing the gun. Iwai immediately exploited this, who immediately grabbed the gun from Shoko and fired it at Shoko and Yuki. But instead the gun exploded and killed Iwai, so Yuki and Shoko managed to survive. The miniature statue then announced that Yuki had again managed to get a bonus, but he looked very annoyed and destroyed the miniature statue. Even though his body was destroyed, the miniature statue could still speak and announce that the game was over and the door to the room opened automatically. After that, Shoko and Yuki walked down the spiral staircase they passed on the first day and managed to arrive at the place where everyone first gathered. There, Yuki is approached by one of the game organizers who gives him a bag containing 129 million yen in cash from the hourly wages and bonuses. But Shoko got nothing. Seeing this oddity, Shoko finally revealed that she had been working for the game master and was responsible for making the game as interesting as possible to increase the number of viewers. Shoko also admitted that she was the one who opened the door to the prison cell that locked Iwai. Not only that, it turns out that Shoko put the gun in the box in Yuki's room. After saying everything, Shoko walked away. But Yuki then chases after her and asks why Shoko involved herself in the deadly game. Shoko replied that a coward would look very attractive to the audience when trapped in a deadly game. But when Yuki asked why Shoko was helping him, she just kept quiet and got into the car. The film ends by showing Mr. Ando who, unexpectedly, turns out to be still alive and only pretends to be dead because he is determined to survive until the end of the game and get out of the deadly game alive. Yuki and Mr. Ando then walked home together. Yuki then threw away the bag containing the money.